Yes, sir. The City Council rescinded the $500 cap for Tier 1 and Tier 2 retirees on 9 May 2017. At the August 14, 2017 meeting, City Council was presented 3 different impact scenarios by the city's actuary, Foster & Foster, followed by a workshop with retirees on 7 November 2017. At the 9 January 2018 council meeting, staff presented an advisability requesting guidance from council with options regarding reinstating the cap at a higher subsidy level. Council directed staff to research the impact on cash flow of including approximately 20 Tier 3 drop members in the Tier 1 and Tier 2 and providing an analysis of impact of potential cost and millage rates at $500 and $700 cap and no cap subsidy levels. The estimated OPEB 75 liability generated by removing the cap on Tiers 1 and 2 is $74.5 million. Removing the cap on Tier 3 drop group increases the liability by $1.3 million, generating a total liability of $75.8 million. Prior to removing the $500 cap, the estimated Gatsby 75 liability was $57.7 million. Finance has provided a quantitative analysis of the above actions as an attachment to your packet, and staff is available to answer any questions that you may have during this discussions.
Clerk, do we have cards on this item?
Yes, sir. Would you like to start? Okay. Reggie Bell, but I believe he may have left.
He's outside. Can you yell at him? I'll yell at him.
That's all right. Go to the next one. He'll come in.
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnston, 860 Poinsettia Avenue. This has been described as, Mr. Johnson described it as, we're about to fall off the cliff. That was the last one. So this is a very important issue, and I've spent many hours on it, and I'm asking for more time. I'm asking to speed about 20 minutes.
No, sir.
Well, okay, no, sir. All right, I'll see what I can do. I'll speed it up. This is a puzzle, and Bridget will agree with that. It's a very complicated puzzle, and we didn't have a lot of answers last council meeting to many questions. Didn't have sufficient answers, and so what I've done is I've tried to narrow it into a part of the puzzle that I'm looking at, and that is the unfunded liability of $74 million and the $3.5 million to be given annual to go into the trust fund. So. Bridget and I agree on a number of things, and that it's a complicated puzzle, and that the liability becomes zero with the death of all of the employees that are the group we're talking about. This benefit can be completely eliminated by a council decision because this is not a guaranteed issue. It's benefits. It's at council discretion, and that's what you're doing right now. It's your discretion. That it was demonstrated at the last council meeting that city staff has not had the time to enable you to make a decision as far as because the answer to there's so many questions that didn't have answers to about this unfunded liability issue. So what I prepared is notes that I've given to you in an email, and this is my handout. On the back of the page, on the back of the handout is the trend that I completed that has been requested by Mark Leslie and a number of people. So presently we have a number of people with the unanswered question about this piece of the puzzle, which I believe I have a very good understanding. And that is, then the questions were asked by, and I want to mention the people: Steve Bridges, Hillary Arena, Mark Leslie, Kathleen Mosley, Karen Roundseville, and Tom House. So all those people, we did not have answers to their questions, as you can see in these notes, and that is regarding that piece of the puzzle that I'm talking about now. So I'm going to read to you the conclusion of my notes Here's the conclusion. Unfortunately, time of staff and council to devote to this agenda item is seriously limited, impaired. There are numerous unanswered questions and inadequate responses by staff and council and city's actuary, who's absent, to concerns and objections.
Mr. Johnston, sir. I couldn't give you 20 minutes because then I would have had to do it for everybody else in here, and then we would have been here serving breakfast, I think. But I will give you an additional 3 minutes if you would like it at this point.
I would certainly appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
I would make that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
I'll try to talk very fast. Okay. Okay. So my conclusion to the notes is as follows. Unfortunately, I read that sentence. There are numerous unanswered questions and inadequate responses by staff and council and city's actuary I mentioned, to concerns and objections voiced by retirees at this meeting. The actuary, of course, was absent from that meeting. So let's go to the back. Let's go to the back. Everybody go to the back of the sheet. And you see that there's 3 graphs. What I've done on this is that Mark Leslie and some other people asked for an extension beyond the 10 years that we had presented. And so that's what I've done. I've done the trend graph. These are all trend graphs. They're not just actual, they're trend graphs. So on the first graph you see, it's called Trend of Unfunded Liability Required by GASB 75. It's in millions of dollars. It begins at $74,500,000 2018. And it goes, you go in time and years, and before 2080 it will go down to 0 because note 4 says that the death of the last existing retired employee occurs at this point. 0 liability. So, and also in this case over here, we have the second graph has the trend of unfunded liability. No, it has the trend of OPEB cash flow. And I got that directly from page 382 of the agenda packet. And that's what I've plotted. We have the first 10 years that's given in the packet. I went ahead with the trend to note number 4, death of everybody in the retiree program. The next graph, I have estimated annual premiums. It starts at some value, and then it goes to 0. So all of these graphs have a similarity. They end in 0. They all end at 0. Now, I have note number 5. You see, it can occur actually at any place, and that is when council makes a decision to eliminate the program. Okay, so let me give you an example. So what happens is that 10 years from now, I'm putting in 10 years, I'm putting in $3.5 million a year or so, and I keep putting that into a fund. 10 years from now, what happens is that, let's say council decides, well, we're going to eliminate this program. Well, I've got an $80 million liability right over here. I got $35 million right here in this fund. And council makes this decision. What happens to this $80 million liability, unfunded liability? It goes to 0. What happens to this $35 million? I'm not sure. We could put it in our pocket, but we got this $35 million. So what I'm saying is that when we have that decision, or maybe something similar to that, what's going to happen is going to have $80 million plus $35 million, $115 million, and it came out of nowhere. So I don't know. Can I read the conclusion, which is 1 paragraph?
I can't give you any more time, sir. I have to do it with everybody else.
The conclusion? Well, nope. All right. Well, it's a serious conclusion. So this is a serious issue. So I'm leaving, and I would like you to listen to it.
Next card, please, clerk. Yes.
This is actually for Bridget. Can you explain, because I don't think that that's correct, that our unfunded liability will be at 0. Could you just clarify that?
I'm not the actuary, so I cannot give you the exact number, but I have spoken to the actuary a lot about this issue, and I can assure you that the liability will not go to 0. If something happened to all of the people in these tiers that we're discussing tonight, it will go down, but it will not go to 0. Because there are other people that are still coming behind them in the plan. They may be at a lesser dollar amount, but they will still be in the plan.
Thank you. Next card, clerk.
Steve Bridges.
Sorry, it took me a while to get here. Steve Bridges, City of Titusville retiree. And I'll say it again. Here we are again. I knew this one was coming, though. I'll give you that. I'm going to say two things. I've said one before. It's tough for the retirees to keep thinking that you keep trying to reduce your liability on the backs of the retirees. Number one. Number two is, I was reminded today that the city, and I'm sure council has gone through these, and this is not an accusation of any kind, does the ethics training. Part of that training, I was reminded, was keep your word. That's all we've asked you to do. I don't know what your decision is tonight. I have no clue. I haven't seen hiding her hair what's going to happen with that, but that's all I've been asking. And I want to remind you of the ethical considerations that we presented to you before. Thank you.
I think Mr. Bell was out of the room, so.
Yes, sir.
Oh, his-
Reggie Bell, City of Titusville. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all, Mr. Mayor and council members, and Mr. City Manager. I don't want to echo, but it's almost hard not to because there's concern, obviously. The last time I spoke to council, Mr. Johnson wasn't the mayor, and I congratulated him for his election. But I just wanted to remind him, and I know he remembers, that the other mayor said, the next time you speak, Mr. Bell, you can have additional 5 minutes. Now, I am asking and petitioning this council for that additional 5 minutes because the last time Dwight Severs was asked by the mayor, would you like more time, Mr. Severs? And he said, obviously, yes. Who's going to turn down time to speak to you all? I like to say this. It's sad. Mr. Bridges talked about ethics. You think about the city employees who stopped working for the city because they were promised if you retire or leave by a certain date, you would be able to get benefits forever. Now, I could ask a show of hands how many people was told that. Quite a few. And there was an exodus because of that, a mass exiting. So they would save the city money. But see, their employment meant that they were taking care of their families with that income. So they lost income when they left, right? Because if you're no longer working, it's done. So that income that they were getting based on what they were promised when they were hired, as long as you're gainfully employed, you will be paid a fair market value for your services. Now, if you leave, we'll give you benefits. Not an if, not an and, not a but. And whether it's in writing or not, you said it. And anything said at this council meeting, guess what? Ms. Wanda over there, she's recording it. It's in writing. You can't do people that way. Now, my dad told me one time, he said, Kent died in 1914. That's when the first war started. Because everybody said you can't have a world war. We had one. So I won't say can't. But what I will say is it shouldn't happen. It really shouldn't. Those individuals who stop work based on a principle or a promise are no longer able to continue to work for the city, and now it's alleged that they most probably won't be able to have benefits, or if they do, they'll have to pay for them themselves. Can I have a few more minutes?
Would you like 3 minutes, sir?
I would love that.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you very
Motion
much.
Second.
Thank you very
All-
much.
All in favor, say yes. Yes. Go right ahead.
Okay, now, don't change your mind. I saw that tonight already, so I'm going to be shot down. Anyway, that's not a pun. That's just, I'm kidding. Well, however, I thought about it. I said I wasn't going to come down because I have insurance. I have separate insurance. So it won't necessarily hurt me one way or another, but it will. Because this is my brethren and sister in here. I worked with these people for 32 years. And a lot of them may not like me saying that, and I'm not necessarily speaking for them, but I'm speaking for us. It's wrong what's being proposed. I remember the last meeting, question was asked to Joe De Niro, where'd you get that $500 figure? And someone said, was it just arbitrary? And the answer was, yes. Isn't that sad? We do studies for everything, but then an arbitrary number for people who worked for this city and dedicated their lives, and most of their chronic illnesses they acquired after they started working at the city. Because the city probably wouldn't have hired them if they had some of the things and injuries. And when you talk about HIPAA, we're just talking facts. And so now, as long as they live and the longer they live, the more benefits they'll need. And the cost, as we all know, is relatively exorbitant. Please consider what was said before you all to our employees, because we believed you. And you talk about ethics, you talk about trust, it has to start here. People sit and they think about what they want to say. Most of y'all know me, and you ain't got to wonder what's on my mind. You can't say, well, I thought you said that, Reggie, because you don't have to think about it. And that's not a brag, that's just a fact. And maybe you get tired of hearing me talk about the same thing, but it's sad. I sit in the back and I listen to some of the ladies talk, and they said, I don't know what I'm going to do if they do that. What if that was your sister or your mother? I'm sorry, but this is Titusville. It's supposed to be a great place to live, to work, and people appreciate each other. And ethics is something that shouldn't be a thing of the past. Now, I just want to ask one question, please, if I may. I know, I see it.
Hurry.
I see it. I want to ask the question.
Go.
When Wanda read about the rules, and I need clarity, seriously, because I'm confused. I thought she said you can only talk about one subject. You can't talk about the same subject twice. I didn't know you can only talk about one subject. That's why I wanted to talk. I want to talk about something else. I didn't want to talk about an ad hoc committee or whatever. I'm just saying. So could I get some clarity on that?
Not from me.
From who?
You have to go after the meeting to the city attorney. Okay.
Can the city attorney talk about it now?
No, sir.
He can't answer that question.
You're talking about one subject now. That you just jumped over to a second subject.
No, I'm not. You misunderstood me, but
Sir,
that's okay.
your time is up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You changed your mind. Next card, please.
Hillary Arena.
Give him hell, Hillary.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Manager, Council members. My name is Hillary Arena, 369 Acorn Drive, Titusville, where I've resided for over 52 years in the city limits of Titusville. I also would like to ask for additional time, 3 minutes when my time is up, if I may. But I'll proceed. Being passed out to you, I have 2 attachments that I would just like to address. The first one is a chart that was prepared by the Human Resources Department showing the finite group of retirees, 96 total in Tier 1 and 2. That number is going to reduce by 13 retirees this year, making that group of Tier 1 and Tier 2 retirees 83. In 5 years, the group will be less than half its current size. In 10 years, there will only be 3 retirees in Tier 1 and Tier 2. A finite group of employees, retirees. The second attachment you have, or second notice, is from page 1 of the OPEB report prepared by the city's actuaries, Foster & Foster, under Gatsby 45 as of October 1, 2015. Not sure if any of you have seen that before, but I wanted to point out a very important line item on there. As you can see from the report, the annual OPEB cost or expense is $3.6 million per your actuary's report for 10/15 to 9/30. So when you hear these larger, scary numbers that everybody keeps throwing out there of 75.8 million, 74.3, 57.7 million in unfunded liabilities, please keep in mind that those larger numbers represent the total costs of all future assumed liabilities for the next 30 years. If you're speaking just to the retirees group, you are speaking about the $3.6 million that is the annual payment towards those unfunded total liabilities across all funds, police, fire, general employees, and retirees. 83 people out of that whole group. That's your group of retirees. So just keep that in mind. Simple math tells you that 96 or 83 now don't generate liabilities in the amount of $75.8 million. Another point, the cap. It's always been an unfunded liability since it started, since the retirees were promised their benefits. The city is required to make the annual retired contribution. That's like on my mortgage. If I have a house for $300,000 and I have a $1,500 mortgage payment, my required payment is my monthly.
Would you like another 3 minutes?
Yes, please, if I could.
Do I have a motion?
You have that motion.
Thank you.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
So that's like the mortgage on my house. I go to the bank. I'm not in debt for I'm in debt. The $300,000, I don't have to pay it off all at once. I'm making my monthly mortgage payments. The city's making its annual required contributions annually. Yes, there's a big number out there of unfunded, but they're not asking you to fund that all. And the city's not funding it, nor will the city continue to fund it. It's being unfunded. I wanted to address 2 points in the agenda tonight. The first one, where the report states that the estimated OPEB 75 liability for removing the cap on Tier 1 and 2 is $74.5 million. That's misleading. The $74.5 million represents the future liability of all current employees and retirees over the 30 years. No one has said what is the annual required contribution or true cost for removing the cap for Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees. In the other part of the agenda, it addresses the Tier 3 employees, stating that it's going to be $1.3 million. Well, if you do 18 drop employees times half of their premium times 12 months, you get a total of about $60,000 for an annual cost, not $1.3 million. In summary, I'd like to say a cap is not warranted or needed as this finite group of retirees decrease in size. We're a minuscule part of unfunded liabilities. Take a look here. Look at the faces in the crowd. Look at your retirees, the ones who fought your crime, fought the fires, dug your ditches, cleaned your streets, emptied your garbage, paid your water bills. These are the retirees that were made a promise. Please, please take no action to place a cap or reinstate a cap on our retiree health care insurance coverage. The city's integrity and trust is at stake. Honor your commitment. Keep your word, keep your promise, restore the trust. Stop reaching into the past to fund the future. I think you owe us that much. Thank you.
Next card, please, Claire.
John Richardson.
Oh, wait a minute. I got some questions here. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Biz or Joe, if you might be able to help me out. I think two things I took away from that, and if you can help clarify for me. One is relative to the total amount of the unfunded liability, 70 million plus is the current number that we're hearing a lot of, which, as stated, represents both current employees plus retirees. Is that about right if we're just solely speaking about the current retirees of Tier 1? Are we right on that like 3% number? So it's not the 72 in total.
When the actuary did the report, what he gives us is a total liability with the plan change. So the $75 million we're talking about, that is, she's correct, that's the total liability once this cap was lifted.
Right.
That's the difference.
Okay.
It's not just their piece, it's the total liability once the cap was lifted. And I think that increased the liability under the old GASB, it increased it by probably about 12 million, but under the new GASB, it was more.
Okay, and if in splitting, and if we have this number, yeah, but if we split, if we segregated, just for my understanding, just tier 1, tier 2, and even the tier 3, what would that total liability be?
I don't know if, I'm sorry.
Not, so
What do you mean by
not counting
the
it as-
pieces?
Yeah, my apologies.
I
So-
don't have it by the pieces. I have the total numbers.
Okay,
With
all
the
right.
different plan design. We don't have just tier 1, just tier 2, just tier 3. It's the
Comprehensive.
comprehensive,
Right, okay,
yes.
all right, thank you.
Member Nelson?
I need Hillary back, I think, if she doesn't mind. Oh, okay, I won't ask you any of those questions. This is a fairly easy question.
Oh.
You came up with a total of 96 employees, retirees?
Retirees.
Okay, how did you come up with that number?
That chart that was just passed out to you.
Right.
If you look across the bottom and you see the number 88 underneath the third column where it says cities paid 100% of the premium.
Okay.
There's 88 in there because there's a total of 124. If you add 88 plus 15 going across plus 19 plus 2. Those
Okay.
are the different tiers, 1, 2, 3, and then that fourth group is after the date we're talking about that don't have this benefit or interest. So the 88 comes from there. What'd you ask me? That's where, well,
I
sorry,
thought you-
96, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
'cause-
and I'm like, where'd I get 96?
Correct, that's 88 plus the 15. See, 88 in tier 1, 15 in tier 2, and then we took 7 away because in 1952, if you go across, 6 people and 1 person, that's 7. 7 people hit Medicare age last year, where it shows 17 people are
Okay.
hitting it this year in 2018.
So that's 96.
So that's 96. 88 plus 15 minus 7.
Okay. I don't have my calculator, but, okay. So, and then you were saying I think you said in 5 years, 83 will be off that list.
Right,
Or
if you-
83 will be on that list.
If you go from 1953 to 1958, that's 5 more years, and you go down the tier 1 and tier group, and you subtract those numbers, you will come up with less than half, 47 or whatever it is.
Okay.
Less than half. And then if you go 10 years out, from 1958 to 1968, and you take those off, you will have 3 retirees in tier 1 and tier 2 because everybody will be dead or they will have been moved to Medicare.
Preferably
And those 3
Medicare.
people could die in those 10 years anyway, but I'm just saying if mortality holds.
Well, we prefer Medicare.
Well, we do, but
Yeah.
death is an option sometimes.
Not a good option. Okay, thank you, that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I had a question for Bridget, and I asked you the other day. In terms of that $74 million liability, what would be the impact on the city?
Well, if you're just talking about the liability, it will affect our ability to issue debt. I know that a lot of people don't believe that's true, but it will. It'll affect next year's budget because we finance police vehicles, we finance radios, we finance all kinds of things. The rates won't be as low. I don't know what the rates will be, but I know they won't be as low. We've talked to the auditors, we've talked to our financial advisors, we've talked to all kinds of people who are aware of GASB 75, and they all agree that it will impact us in that way. I'm more concerned about the cash flow,
Yeah.
but the liability will be a big issue for us.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Member Stokel?
Thank you. Bridget, I had a couple questions for you. Hillary brought up the chart with the people that are going to be aging out. Are those numbers accounted for in the actuarial report already?
They are.
Okay.
And just so you all know, the summary reports that I gave you all, just kind of projecting out costs over the next few years with premium increases, the numbers that I have that came directly from HR are not the same numbers.
Okay.
For tier 1 and tier 2, 10 years out, I show 24 people are still left in tiers 1 and tiers 2, not the numbers she has. So I don't know where the difference is, but the numbers I got straight from HR, and those are the numbers they report to the state, Joe, I believe you said, or to somebody they report out. So my numbers are higher because the participants based on age are more. So I don't know what that discrepancy is, but
Okay.
that is what it is.
And then was cash flow adjusted for that as well?
For which?
And the cash flow, I think there was a document in
Yes.
there. Okay.
Yes. What I did was, when we gave you the different scenarios, it's the premium increase times the change, the expected change in retirees, and we did that just based on retirement age.
Okay. And then I think there's some confusion on this unfunded liability, so I want to try to clarify a little bit. It sounded like Vice Mayor was trying to see if we could just capture that amount for tier 1 and tier 2, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if that's possible to do, because when we book it, we have to include all of our unfunded liability for all current employees,
Yes.
so it's kind of almost impossible to separate that.
Well, you can, but you're going to have to pay an actuary a lot of money to do it.
Okay, so since we're not there, can you give us numbers for unfunded liability with a cap in place of $700, and then unfunded liability versus no cap in place? Because it sounds like that's kind of what we would be looking at when making a decision.
So under the new GASB, which will be implemented as of our next set of financial statements, with the tier removed on tiers 1 and 2, the liability is going to be $74.5 million.
Okay. With no cap.
With no cap.
And then if we were to put a $700 cap in place, what would our unfunded liability go down to?
Hang on to find that one. I'm buried and I'm here. It's on this one. That's not on the GASB 75. I know I have that.
Sorry, I know, I didn't mean to put you on the
If I recall
spot.
correctly, I think it was I think the difference was like a $20 million.
It was 57.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought it was a $20 million
It
gap,
is.
but I didn't remember
Okay.
exactly.
57, okay, with 700, okay. And then, again, this is another question I asked, and I think Hillary touched on it a little bit. It's the fact that we had this unfunded liability prior to all of this happening, but I think what's happened now with the new GASB is now we're being required to actually report it, where in the past, we didn't. Is that correct?
Under the old GASB, we were required to book a liability, but it was only for the ARC. It was only for that year. And so it was probably $4 or $5 million.
So it's a little misleading.
It was just basically booking that amount for that point in time. Now we have to book the whole thing. Even
Okay.
though it's always been there, it was never on our financial statements.
Okay. Which makes me a little worried, because now we're doing that when we go out to go finance things, and I know it's going to be happening across the board, but if you guys remember the other charts we looked at, ours is so much higher than several other cities. So I think that while everybody's going to be going up, I think ours is going to be going up probably a lot more than other people or other cities. So that's one of my concerns that I'm kind of having right now. So thank you. That answers some of my questions.
Next card.
John Richardson,
I yield to the next speaker.
Next speaker.
Chris McGraw,
Good evening. I'm Chris McGraw. I'm a retiree of the city of Titusville. I live in Merritt Island. So I'm one of the drop people. I'll remind you that when I entered the drop in 2011, the HR policy was that my insurance would be paid. In 2013, council said, we're going to change the policy. But I was locked into it. I couldn't change my mind about the drop. I was considered retired. And so that's kind of the rub for me, and I think for all the other drop people, is even though they said a date of April of 2014, that would have made me leave the drop, which several people did, and forego that deferred retirement money so that I could keep my health insurance. And now here, a year later, they're council put caps on it. It's taking caps off of it and putting a cap back on it, or suggesting to put a cap back on it. And so you can kind of understand the uncertainty that the retirees are living under, and myself included. So I chose to stay in the drop. And so when I actually ended the drop, and when I retired, mine was a 50% contribution. So my premium is $278 a month right now. So my request to council is to take us drop people, tier 3 people, and move us to the tier 1 people. And then we're part of tier 1, whatever you decide. So that's my request of council. And then the second thing about the unfunded liabilities. So that's over a 30-year period. And I believe that, you can correct me, Bridget, if I'm wrong, that's really a non-cash number. The $70 million is not minus out of our cash of $70 million. We're paying through the budget, the premium for the health insurance are paid through the operating budget. Yes. So the cash element of that is the amount the city pays, is it not, for the premiums? And so the unfunded liability is not a cash item of cash flow. I don't understand when you speak of the cash flow of the unfunded liability, the effect on the budget.
I think there's two. I mean, you are correct. We are pay-as-you-go, but you also know, because you were on the OPEB board, that we also have a trust fund, and if we could fund the ARC, then the liability would go down. A lot of these costs would go down that we have. So when I speak of cash flow, I'm talking about without a cap, the city will be paying more in terms of premiums for the retirees, because there was a cap. Without a cap, we're paying more. And also, if the city's desire is to make its balance sheet be a little more reasonable to where we're not in negative unrestricted fund balance and our net asset numbers are respectable again, then we're going to have to contribute to that ARC.
But the city is not statutorily required to contribute to the ARC.
We're not required to, but isn't that the responsible thing to do if we know we have these, we know these other issues are at stake?
Well, we've had the OPEB board for, 10 years now? And the city hasn't once contributed the full ARC. Sometimes they budget $400,000, which is a partial payment on the ARC, and sometimes they don't because they don't have the cash for it. So that means the liability goes up. It's at the discretion of the city, though. And so that's the part. My point is that the insurance premiums each year are paid. The OPEB liability you choose to fund or not based on what you decide to do. And so I just want to kind of separate that from saying, we're going to be in cash flow, disaster. The cash flow disaster is how much are the current premiums, which are not even, $551 right now a person. So that's sort of, to me, the reality of what the real premium costs are the realities. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody? No. Next card, please, clerk.
Scott Gannicky.
Hi, Scott Gannicky, 827 Trailwood Avenue in Titusville, retiree. God, what a meeting we had a couple weeks ago. I don't want to beat a dead horse with a lot of this, but do you see what happens when you mess with promises? Do you see the mess that you get into with this? It's not about the numbers and all of this, because that's been hanging out there. It's just something that's more out there now. It's always been there. The bottom line is this is such a mess because you're trying to put it on the backs of people that have given their time and given their lives to this city on the understanding that when we left we would have these benefits, and now they're trying to be messed with, and it's not fair. And at the end of the day, just like Reggie said, and so many other people have said, this is about keeping your word, keeping true to what we were told that we were going to get if we put in X amount of time. And to take that away and succumb to, a bunch of numbers thrown at you that are designed to scare you, that are designed to befuddle you, that are designed to take advantage of your perhaps naivety in some of these processes is not fair. It's just not fair. And it keeps getting thrown out there. And I would just say this, bottom line, stick to your word, be true to your employees, maintain your credibility and this city's credibility, do the right thing, and just don't succumb to things that are thrown at you that are designed to confuse you and make you make decisions that are not in the best interest of the city and these employees that have given their 25, 30 and more years to you to make this city great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Joel McPherson.
Joel McPherson, Potomac Drive, Merritt Island. I retired after 16 years with the city. Hopefully this will be a solution for you. I recently watched a few hours of YouTube and got caught up on all these discussions. And we talked about property values and the city's revenues and actuarial obligations. A lot of great speakers, a lot of good points were made. And from the heart, I think we can all agree that this discussion has been from the heart. And what I've learned from all this is the city, first thing I've learned is I need glasses. What I learned is the city needs money to meet these obligations, and the city can either raise taxes or lower costs. And I believe that significant amounts of money can be found by examining the city's spending. There are areas like take-home vehicles and overtime that beg your examination, but I only want to address one area, and that's accident insurance. The city is self-funded for its accidents. Every year we put over $1 million, $1,125,000 to be exact, in a loss fund to pay for these losses. Throughout the year, we pay for cut fingers and mailboxes that we knock down out of this loss fund. And at the end of the year, what's left in the loss fund, the city gets to keep. Imagine a year free of accidents. The city could pocket over $1 million. Of course, going a year without worker injury or causing property damage sounds pretty far-fetched, but it is a goal worth shooting for. That $1 million could solve this whole debate. Is accident-free far-fetched? The city used to put a lot of emphasis on safety training, safety incentives, and contesting each damage claim. How do we know if we were effective doing all that? Well, one barometer of the city's safety success is called a mod rate. Here's how that works. The state of Florida runs the workers' compensation program. The work comp program is funded through a fee assessment. The city is charged a fee based on the number of employees and how hazardous their jobs are. The fee is further modified by your safety track record. The fee starts at a mod rate of 1. If the city has too many accidents, it climbs over 1. If the city is real good about holding the line at accidents, the number is below 1. The mod rate of 1 means that you're paying...
Mr. McPherson, would you like additional time?
Yes, if I could have a couple more minutes. Just
2 minutes?
Yes, 2 is fine.
So moved. I'll make that motion.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Time flies. The mod rate of 1 means that you pay what you should be paying, according to the state of Florida. Anything over 1, you're paying too much. And if you can get the mod rate under 1, you save some money. Now, the city's current mod rate is 1.14. which is not a terrible mod rate, but it's a significant mod rate. As a barometer of how successful our safety program is, anything over a 1 means that we have some work to do if we hope to preserve any of that $1 million sitting in the loss fund. Again, the city has opportunities like work comp to find money to finance its obligations. And until there's a push to find these opportunities, I don't think that you should fund your obligations out of my retirement. Thank you.
Next card, please.
Karen Ronzabal.
Karen Ronzabal, 26-year employee and retiree of the city of Titusville. Good evening. There's been so much said, and I'm not going to take some time to reiterate a lot of the very good points that have been made by the previous speakers. I would like to just call attention to the fact, perhaps once again, that Tier 1 and Tier group is that finite group. And as you can see by the tables, no matter which one you're looking at, that group is going to diminish as we move forward in age. We're going to become Medicare age. We're going to become eligible for the Medicare supplement as opposed to the non-Medicare retiree insurance. But the absence of a cap, no cap, is not going to bankrupt the city of Titusville. It's just not that 124 employees and putting that cap on. Now, I realize that the cap, as Chris helped us understand, does apply to future employees that may have been hired when we still had a provision where retirees were going to receive a portion of their health care insurance paid for. But there's just not an immediate urgency, I think, for action right now. So I would encourage you to take no action to implement no cap. As for general employees, that group that I represented with so many years on the Titusville General Employees Pension Board, just to remind you that the average pension for a general employee is just right there around $1,000. There's a lot that are a lot less, but a general employee doesn't receive a COLA. So what you retire with 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or when a lot of those employees were talking about, that $900 that they got when they retired in 1995, they're still just getting $900 today. And so anything that would come out of that $900, that's going to reduce that level for them. So, once again, let your promise made years ago be your promise kept. I know we've talked about maybe trying to offer up solutions or alternatives. And I know that retiree health insurance is set by policy. And policy is set by staff. And particularly for general employees and those that are non-represented by a bargaining agency, it can be changed by, plucking a number out of the air, if you will. One alternative might be to establish that policy by resolution. That might give a little bit of comfort to the retirees, because that way we would know that the policy is going to have to come back to City Council, at least for an action on a resolution. So anyway, I think that about takes care of it, unless there's any questions.
Any questions? See none? Thank you. Next card, please.
Kathy Mosley.
Hello. I thought 2 weeks ago that was going to be the last time I was ever going to speak to you. I thought I had said everything I was going to say. And then I got the agenda packet attachments and looked at it. And I looked at one of the sheets that talked about if you put this cap on, and then the millage rate will go up to this, and if you put it at 700 and the millage rate, this is what I was talking about the last time, not being able to trust. That millage rate is up to council to set, looking at all the different influxes, the revenue in, the cost out every year. that is not playing a fair, straight game by trying to intimate that our insurance is going to blow up the millage rate. That's not true. It can if you let it, but the millage rate is usually accommodated by savings in here, savings in there. I do want to point out that this whole thing about caps, all the rest of it, started because a couple of people in administration decided, okay, we changed the insurance in '95 because we want all these higher paid people to leave. We'll give them their insurance for nothing. In 2003, they changed it again and said, okay, we'll lessen our liability this way. Then they kept on. The latest one is no retiree gets an insurance that was hired after October 1st. So they've done it exactly the way that we've said to do it. Start with the ones that are coming on and do. Now all of a sudden, somebody decided this is the easy way. We have a liability. We're going to make these employees that are getting that pay. So they've reached into the past. But I want to point out something. When you reach that far into the past in 1994, 1995, 1996, as Karen alluded, there's some of these people that are only making $300 or $400 on their pension, if that. I asked Joe to verify at the last meeting, was this cap also to be put on retirees who reached Medicare age? The answer was yes. About 20 months ago, I was at a meeting, and there was discussion about retirees, and former city attorney Dwight Sievers entered in and said, this is a scare tactic. You should not be scaring these old people like this, making them come to a meeting. May I have a couple more minutes?
I'm sorry, say again?
May I have a couple more minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Motion for 3 minutes, a motion and a second.
Thank you.
All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So Dwight turns to Joe and says, isn't it true, Joe, that retirees that are pension eligible or Medicare eligible will probably never reach that cap? That's true, they'll never reach that cap. Well, I'm pretty sure that the amount 18 to 20 months ago when you said that has changed and has gone up from what you quoted in that meeting. And that's where you get the rub. Because if you think it's bad enough for all the rest of us, what about those people? You think they can take a hit of $100, $150, $200? They will go to no insurance. And don't forget, when you go to 65, we have to pay. We have to pay for our Part B to get our Part D from the city. So it's not like we're getting it forever for nothing. You have to pay it now. What you're telling them is limited revenue or limited income, no COLA, everything else, and now you're going to be paying out what little you have toward that. All because somebody sat down and said, I got a great idea. Let's go back and charge those people. We should not even be having this discussion. We should not be having a discussion on caps. And by the way, 500, 700, you put that 700 on, Joe already said a meeting or so ago that he said, yeah, I think he said it's 563. And then he said, but it really should be 700. We're just not charging what we should do. So you're going to put a cap of 700 on? Bum, bum. We're going to start paying anyway. Be fair. Be right. They already screwed those people in 2014 out of thousands of dollars because they lied. They are lying now. Current employees, you need to watch because you're going to be next. You think yours is safe? It's not because they're lying to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I don't know if you guys have the numbers for how much we are paying for those that are on Medicare? What is the additional amount for their supplemental plan?
It depends on which plan. We have two options for
Okay.
the Medicare eligible. The one option is a Medicare Advantage plan, which is below the $500 or $553 that we pay or contribute for the active employees. It's considerably less. It's around the $400 per member per month. The supplement, the Cigna supplement that we also pay for Medicare eligible employees is tiered depending on the member or the retiree's age. And it escalates from $400. Now, keep in mind that the Medicare supplement is a medical supplement and a prescription drug plan. So that's where the $420 or so, and I don't have the tiers in front of me, but it's based on that. So both of those plans, should council decide on looking at a cap, is well below now that 553 or 500, or even going to 700. It's still, that subsidy would go a long way with respect to that cap. So, and we did that for a number of reasons, to be more cost effective in how we're paying for Medicare programs, in terms of gaining an advantage as a Medicare supplement, because Medicare is primary, and these plans are secondary, compared to if these employees were on the active plan, which would be a lot more costly, where that contribution's at $553. So that's why we've gone to this fully insured product, if you will, that's more cost effective for the city in terms of paying that obligation and the employees for gaining the benefits.
Okay, so the supplemental plan is around 400 something. So it's about, so people that are on Medicare, it's roughly $100 cheaper than if they were not Medicare eligible. Is that
compared to what the city contributes to an active employee? That's
right.
$553. So you can use that analysis. What we contribute to the active employee,
okay,
is $553. And then depending on what Medicare plan you're on, it's either the 400, like I said, roughly, and I don't have the per member per month,
okay,
but it's a lot less than that 553.
Okay. And then this one's for Bridget. Just to clarify, I think that you put in here the millage rates just to give us an idea of cash flow numbers. So if we were to keep the same amount of money coming in, with that no cap in paying the retirees with the projected rate of increase, that would be what, if we're not cutting from any other area or department and not including what's happening with the state with the homestead and where we're going to be losing income there, you're just kind of giving us an idea of the millage rate of what
Yes.
you would be looking at without cutting some other department or area.
Yes, that was
Okay.
just perspective, because the only way we can do that is based on now.
Right.
You can't look into the future and decide what you're going to fund or cut or
Okay.
hire. So that was just kind of to give you an idea of if it were today, this is what those scenarios would look like.
Okay. I think that's my dilemma that I'm getting at is I would love to fund the retiree health care benefits. My concern of what's going to happen is where is that money coming from? And I'm very fearful that it's going to come back on retirees through higher deductibles that you're going to be paying. I think we're already looking at different plans for health insurance now. And my fear is just in order to compensate for this amount is going to be worse plans and still liability falling right back on the retirees. And that's where I'm at. It's really tough situation I feel like I'm in right now.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Thomas House.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tom House. I'm a retiree. I live on Peachtree Street here in Titusville. I promised my beautiful bride that tonight I wouldn't be mean. I don't really mean to be mean. I'm a passionate person when we're talking about retirees and our benefits and what were promised to us back in the day and what the City Council through the ELT members have done to the retirees today. Luckily, and I've told you before, those of us that are Tier 3 drop members, we were threatened by the city. You either get out or we're taking your insurance. I will tell you that my former chief of police, Tony Bollinger, called me into the office and said, you'd be a fool to get out. If you get out, I'm telling you now, ELT's already had this discussion. We're going after the retirees' health insurance. And not even a couple of months later, they did exactly that. They went right after the retirees' health insurance. That tells me that this isn't just something that happens overnight. This is ELT gate in Titusville, if you ask me. This is your ELT members coming together to find out, how to solve the city's economic solutions on the back of the retirees. I wasn't crazy. I didn't get out. I stayed. And you're right, I did stay. Now, I know the city manager put an addendum in there that said that the unions negotiated for retirees. That's not true. We're not union members anymore. We're not part of a union. We're not FOP. We're not PBA. We're not the fire union or the LIU, okay? And I don't know if you've ever sat in on a contract negotiation. I have. I sat in on that 2013 and represented the police department, the police officers. That's not even a negotiation. Joe comes in and says, well, this is what the city's offering. And he sits there and twiddles his thumb because there's really no more negotiation than that. You either like it and accept it. We'll move to impasse after a couple of more meetings. And then we're going to impose our health insurance on you. And that's where you see that in the union contracts. That's not a negotiation. We're a right-to-work state. I understand that. They can impose. They can go to impasse and then impose, and they've done that. It's not a negotiation. Today, when I was looking through the paperwork on the agenda, I also decided to get on the city's website. And under the city's departments, if you go to Human Resources, and you all have computers, they could bring it up here tonight. If you go to Human Resources, at the very bottom of the left-hand column, there's a link that says Welcome New Hires. Click on that. And when you click on it, you're going to get a blank page. That's the future of this city. It's a blank page. Can I have 3 more minutes, sir?
Motion?
Yeah. Yes.
I can't look
All
back
those
here
in
at
favor say yes.
I can't look back here at Officer Kevin Joyce and in good conscience tell him that he should remain employed by the city of Titusville because he truly doesn't have a future. If I was him, I'd go find another city that pays more, that will give him better benefits, and roll the dice to see if he gets a better outcome in life than we are here today. I'm not being mean, I'm passionate, okay? We get these things called Titusville's talking points. And this city brags about how the economy's coming back. It puts in there 200 house subdivisions, 40 house subdivisions, 22 house subdivisions. All of these businesses are coming to Titusville. All of these businesses and residents are bringing in taxes to the city. But that city, they don't include that in what they're seeing for the future for us. That's money coming into the city. Not only that, you have Friday Fast Facts. You get other things. At the end of every fiscal year, our department heads go to their employees and say, hey, we got to tighten up. We can't have any more overtime. If you're doing stuff, you can't make any more purchases, because they want to give money back to the council, back to this city, to show good faith that we're working with our budgets well. That's a shell game. When they ask for money for their budgets, they need to ask for what they need. Don't ask for what you need because at the end of the fiscal year, you want to give some money back to show good faith that you're working with the finances, because that money could be going to pay for these retirees. It could be going to pay for the health insurance. Brian Littorell is a retiree. His wife went to Cigna Insurance. She got a plan on her own right off the street, and I can talk about this because I asked him. She got a plan right off the street that rivals the city's plan, and she's paying $460 a month. Now, the city's paying $553.78. And I know because out of that $553.78, because I'm considered a Tier 3, I'm paying $278.89 of that. I still want this council tonight to move people in Tier 3 to Tier 1 where we belong, and to hear these people, we've worked here. Look at that website. That's the future of Titusville. You bring in all these communities and all these businesses. If you don't have the backbone of this city, these workers, firemen, police officers, sanitation workers, you name it. If you don't have them here to provide the services because we're a city of service, those people are going to leave. And we'll be that blank page on his website.
Thank you, sir. Who's up there? Member Stokel.
Tom, I actually had a question for you. No, but you actually touched on kind of my concern with talking to the officers. That's what I'm really worried about is our increase in paying for these benefits. We have to get the money from somewhere. And my fear is, like, I'm already hearing city employees, current ones, like, are we going to lose our plan? Are we going to have to start paying in? And it's already creating this environment.
Yes,
and
ma'am, it is.
It's hard. It's a hard situation.
In 2013, when I worked with the LIU, along with the police and fire, and we were meeting at American Police Hall of Fame about negotiations, I've had some of those general employees call me. I've had some police officers call me and a few firefighters. And they talked about it. They're watching tonight to see what the council does because it depends on what they're planning to do. Mm-hmm. Some of them, I'm telling you, if I'm not vested here, I'd walk away. I'd take what I have right now and walk away. And I would go invest that money somewhere else, and I would go to another job. There's plenty of jobs out there. You just got to find the right fit.
Yeah. Okay, then my other question now. Thank you. I got the paperwork for the Tier 3s.
I'm glad you got that.
Yes, I've been studying that this past week. I guess my confusion with it, the paperwork that I got was for pension plan. And so I feel like those are two separate things. Your pension plan going into drop and being considered quote-unquote retiree to lock in an amount is going to be different than retiring for purposes of getting your medical insurance benefits.
Well, I would disagree with that because if you retire, if Officer Kevin Joyce was able to retire tomorrow and there is no drop, mm-hmm. his pension and his benefits would be locked in.
At that rate. But this, like right here, this is, because you said the first line, it says that in order to become a member of the drop, I must have retired under normal service retirement and elect to defer receipt of my retirement benefit into my drop account. For the purposes of calculating my monthly retirement benefit, the effective date of my participation shall be concurrent with my effective retirement date of that January 1st, 2013.
But it's also saying you have to fully retire.
But you're not, because you're still working. Because then I'm wondering, why did the people that why are people that are in Tier 1 and Tier 2, why didn't they elect to go into drop to lock in that benefit as well?
Sarah, people in Tier 2, just so you know, those are people that have not did a full retirement. They retired early by age, some of them by age.
Okay.
That's why there's a Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Truth be told, if the city ELT would have done this right, we wouldn't have all these tiers because they would have grandfathered everybody prior to that time into what they were. And then from that point forward, they would have made the changes. They didn't want to do it the easy way, so they started making all these tiers. Tier 1, full retirement employees. Mm-hmm. Tier 2, those who retired at an early age or an early retirement. And then Tier 3, those of us who did 25 or more years, full retirements, and because we didn't get out of the drop, they threatened us with our insurance. Now, I will tell you...
And unfortunately, I can't see that in those meetings. I have this paperwork, which I'm trying to make sense of.
I understand, and that's why I'm glad you're letting me talk to you about that tonight. You know, and it's kind of funny. Another thing that we have going on is we took away the drop from all the employees. However, we're starting to let ELT department heads retire and then become contract employees to build their own drops. We're also letting them opt out of the city insurance and then get back into it at a later date when they so choose to. So do we have double standards here? Is it everybody at the rank of ELT or above, there's something different that's going on? I'll tell you, I got a friend that works for the state that just went to work for the state. And you would be sick at what he pays for an entire family for insurance. And he works for the state. But because of the level he's at, for a family of 4, he's paying $30 a month for health insurance. Now, he told me people below him in the state don't get that same deal. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right.
We stick to the subject.
Yeah, no, I just needed I need a clarification because this still it looks to me, Tom, it's almost like double dipping. Honestly, if I'm looking at this and reading this right, it's a pension plan which is totally separate, prepared by I think this was prepared by the union attorney. I want to say way separate from the health.
That was approved by the
benefits.
city attorney.
The pension attorney.
Yeah.
So again, separate, and so to me. They're not the same thing, so it's hard for
It
me to
wouldn't be
say,
any
hey,
different
this.
than me leaving and going to work at, say, the sheriff's department. That's double dipping. I wasn't double dipping. I was given something that the city offered me. I took advantage. I took their offer, and that's what I did. You would have done the same thing. And I'd venture to say, 80 years from now, maybe the only person left in this room will be you.
Stop it.
Okay?
Yeah, wish my generation luck because we're getting.
I do
much
wish
nothing.
y'all luck, and
It's tough.
And the city does do ethical training, and I agree with Scott Genneke. Ethics is a lot, and the people behind me and the people back there holding guns and firefighters and all, they're watching tonight because
I agree.
they're trying to make their decision what they're going to do. Are they going to stay here or are they going to go?
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Mr. House, can you come back? You're not getting off that easy.
Yes, ma'am.
So I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot because it's sort of been bothering me the last 2 weeks. So I retired for the purposes of drop.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what you did.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't considered retired. So how do I reconcile that?
Because we're two different governments. You worked
That's
for the
true.
state, we worked for the city. We had people get into the drop to protect their pensions, to protect their benefits.
In what way?
Because we were told that when you retire, you lock your benefits in. I always thought when I retired, I locked my benefits in.
So what you're saying is you retired and then subsequent to retirement, then you lost those benefits.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that.
I think I follow it. I think I answered my own question.
Okay.
But the other question is, how do we reconcile this? You stayed and took the drop money,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody else got out to get the insurance money.
Well, they had the same choice that I had. Okay, they could have stayed. Unfortunately, they didn't have a team leader that came to them or an ELT member come to them and share with them what was shared with me. That was Tony Bollinger.
So how do we make it fair to everybody?
Life isn't fair. It truly isn't. Those people had a choice to make. They could stay in and get the money. I went and talked to a CPA as well who said, no, you'd be silly to get out. Okay?
Right, because you're getting your retirement.
Because I made
at
an
the end, you're getting-
educated decision to stay in, and then I happened to be reading the contract. We fought this. We said, how could they be doing this to us? And we were told we were told by our department heads, it's the city, they're going to do whatever they want. Okay? Just so happens that I happened to read my contract when all this started up again.
Okay.
And come across that first page, and I called a few people about that and said, hey, did y'all really read this? And they started reading theirs. General employees said, hey, ours says the same thing. Fire says ours says the same thing. Unfortunately, we stayed in, we rolled the dice, and that's where we're at. They haven't lost anything. We're looking to gain our insurance. We're looking to gain the same insurance that they're gaining.
But Tom, they have.
They lost the drop money.
They lost
because
their drop money.
The city threatened them and said either get out, and they wanted to keep their insurance. They wanted to keep that payment. And I had heads up. I went around telling people, you're foolish to get out. They're going to go after the retirees' insurance. I said that to many people.
Yeah.
Mike Childs was one of them, and he got out anyway. That's what they decided to do. We decided to stay in, the 19 of us that are there. And now we're fighting for what we believe is right in our cases about insurance, not about the drop money. They're two different things. Those are apples and oranges.
They are.
If they want to fight about the drop money, that's between them and you and whatever that is. We're talking insurance. We're not talking drop money.
No, and I understand that, but you stayed in, you took the drop money, they got out with the understanding that you were going to get the 50%. They got out with the understanding that they would get 100%. So I'm trying to...
Yeah, but they're not even getting the 100% with a cap.
Well, yeah, but I'm trying to figure this out.
I understand.
It's taken...
But I think if you go back and you look at, the city set a date, said that if you were hired before October 1, 2003,
right,
and you retired before 2014, you were considered Tier 1. If you went into the drop and you did your 5 years in the drop, and then you retired before 2014.
I understand the argument. I'm just trying to make it fit. I'm trying to, in my mind, figure out if there's a way to make it fair.
Well,
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that, and I think the fairness when it comes to drop money, that's a different issue altogether.
Okay.
That's on those people that got out. That's something that they have to fight that battle or walk the bridge to get to the other side to see where it's at. We're talking about the 19 people that stayed, that by the standards set by this city for being hired before and retired by a date, we meet that requirement.
Okay.
Thanks, Jolene.
Well,
Anybody else
can
before
I
I
just
sit
say
down?
we're going to do the best we can.
I understand.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Horace Elmore.
Horace Elmore, Mims, Florida. Worked for the city of Titusville, started in 1990. I was promised free medical rest of my days. They tried to boot us out. I bought my time. I paid for it. So, same question, different time. Do I get my money back with interest? I asked you that last week. You say you couldn't answer it. So could I get an answer now?
From me? I'm not an expert on it, sir. I can't give you an answer.
Well, that's your job.
No, it isn't. That's why we have staff members.
Well, if that ain't your job, well, why are you sitting up there? Come on.
It's my job to keep order, which is what I'm doing tonight and what I did last time.
You couldn't answer my question last.
Sir, I can't tell you what the chemicals go into the water either.
Oh,
That's not my job.
come on,
Okay.
come on, man,
Okay.
come on.
All right.
Let's not get on that level. Just answer my question.
I did.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
I told you I don't know the answer.
So
is that not clear?
No, it ain't.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's all I can tell you.
So when you gonna give me an answer?
You go to any one of the people on staff.
I ain't going to them. I'm talking to you.
And I'm talking to you.
Last time I talked to you, the first thing you told me.
I'm not going to argue with
you
debate
said,
with you anymore.
son, I'm older than you. I didn't ask for that last time.
Mr. City Manager, if this man doesn't sit down now, he's out of order. I'm going to call this meeting.
Oh, okay. So I struck a nerve. I got to sit down, right?
No, you're trying to argue.
I'm not arguing with you.
I gave you an answer to your question, sir. Sit down.
You didn't give me an answer.
Sit down.
You gave me what you
No
wanted to
is
give
an
me.
answer also, sir. Sit down, please. Next card, please.
Chuck Bogle.
What? Go ahead.
As per,
Wait 1 second, Chuck.
and, sir, thank you. To the gentleman's question, I presume that there's a, can y'all answer that question? I think that the gentleman, I mean, just logistically, if he kicked in extra money, he bought time and so forth and so on, he's asking, can he get a refund for his time if we were to change policy?
That is not either a fair question for the mayor or staff, because what he did is you buy time into a pension plan, not necessarily insurance. We're dealing with insurance now. There's a lot of issues with that will call for legal conclusions and analysis that the mayor's not going to answer and staff's not going to answer.
It wasn't illegal when I paid my money.
Okay.
Was it?
Anything else? Member Diesel.
If it's possible, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm trying to understand from you from last time. You bought out what? You bought out...
I bought a year
of
in 6
service.
months. They said I had to leave before December the 13th of 13. If I didn't leave before then, I could not get my free medical for life. That's why I wrote...
And that was an offer at that time. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Bell, that may have been what you were speaking to when people left in droves, as you stated. And that was a tier 1, 2 thing? Is it a 1? It's a tier 1 thing. Okay. So your feeling was, or when you're feeling, your thought, your understanding was that you bought what you had to buy to get out in time to get your insurance.
Yes, sir.
And again, that bounces back to what you said, and I got it written down here, but I can't read my writing right now. But basically, you said that there was a time that leave by a certain time with incentive, leave by a certain date, you get insurance. For life.
That's why I left.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Next card, please.
Chuck Bogle.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Okay.
Good to see you guys again. Drive up here from Indian Harbor Beach. My name's Chuck Bogle, former fire chief and ELT member. I was not a party to any secret meetings in ELT, but I understand that there's been a lot of different changes since I left. I left in 2012. And I, too, went into, I'm going to give a little history lesson here because I think I'm the last speaker. No? Okay. Anyway, because I think it's important to understand how we got here. Years ago, people who sat in your chairs made a conscious decision to have a policy to offer people employment with a benefit of lifetime health insurance. They did that because wages were low and they tried to encourage quality people to come here. It was about 2000, 1999, 95, around that, when there was an effort to try to transition some people out to lower some costs, save some money, and do some of those things. That was the first step in regards to trying to deal with this problem that we're dealing with here tonight. In regards, the second step started around the 2000 when we recognized, and there was a company called GRS, we talked about this last time when we had the workshop, Gabriel, Roeder, and Smith, they're a consulting company out of South Florida, that came in and said, hey, you guys are going to have this problem. We had already gone in at 2003 and capped for new hires. So the way to do this is to deal with the people that are coming in the door and not work on the people that are currently here. Because what's happening now is all these folks that are here tonight, they didn't cause this problem. They came to work for an organization that said, we're going to pay you this and give you this benefit for whatever job it is that you were going to perform. And they tried to do that in a fair and equitable manner. Each year, or every so often, there was pay and compensation studies that were done to try to take what the pay and the benefits were to ensure we were providing a fair and equitable wage. Because if you look in your policies and procedures, it's going to tell you probably about the 4th bullet point down that your job is to pay a fair and equitable wage, which sometimes people will argue through contract negotiations and things like that because they think they're underpaid. But long story short, we're all sitting here now being asked to pay for a problem that we didn't create. All we did was we came to work under good faith to work for a wage and a benefit that was told to us, and then many of us, made financial decisions based upon that. Now, before this recent where they started with the different tiers, because the tiers is just a way of saying we're going to treat this group of employees this way, this group another way, this group another way, and it's incrementally as people have gone on. Fortunately, the tier ones are the people who are currently getting the benefit of what was offered or promised. Meaning, when you retire, you're going to get lifetime health at no cost. So far, that has been upheld. What's happening now is we're getting to a point where we're getting to where some of these other, that tier one may get hampered because healthcare costs are escalating. We're going to go surpass that cap as we did, and you guys graciously took on that extra amount for this time, and now we're looking at what are we going to do. So we're kind of just continuing to kick the can down the road. I too would like to ask for some more time if that's possible.
Motion?
I make that motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say yes? Yes. You got it.
Thank you, sir. So the issue is that we all satisfy our end of the bargain by staying as we did. Some left under the pretenses, as I said, of trying to secure the benefit that was going to be offered, and only to find now that there's going to be some action taken, whatever that action may be, that could take away some of that money. We all work in local government and have for years, or represent the people in that. Do we like unfunded state mandates? Nobody does. That's really what you're doing to them. You're giving them an unfunded mandate because now you're saying, hey, what used to be covered is now not covered anymore. Other than the state will tell you, you would now have to provide this service or whatever this is. We're not going to give you any more money to do it. You have to do it under the normal money that you already got, or reducing the pace depending on what the economy is doing and the property taxes and all those other kinds of things. I will tell you, I wanted to say some of those things just from a history standpoint. I was a part of the OPEB as well, as I told you before. The city has made a conscious decision not to fund the ARC. As we discussed at the last meeting when we had the workshop, there's $2 million. Is that still the number that's in the OPEB? Which is basically the first year's ARC. So it took us however many years to get the amount of money that the first year ARC was. An ARC is annual required contribution. Keyword there is required. Now, it's not legislatively mandated. The city was proactive in doing that. And I understand times are tough and all those other kinds of things, and you guys got to make a decision and coming up with the budgets and doing that. But sometimes one could get the opinion that you care more about running the city and doing some of the things that are doing now than the people that helped you get to where you are now. Because you're taking away from what the people that have invested all the time and energy and trying to get them to contribute back to some of the people that are here. And I will agree. I mean, I understand it's a difficult situation to be in that, hey, do you rob Peter to pay Paul? But it goes back to, in my mind, I would like to think I'm a person of integrity. And what I do in the light, I do in the dark, and I'm not going to try to treat anybody wrong or whatnot. But as we talked about before, and a lot of people have mentioned, there was promises, for lack of a better word, that were made. There was an expectation. People made financial decisions on how they were going to live the rest of their lives based upon some of these, and now they're being messed with in one form or another. So it is a diminishing. I mean, I heard what Hillary said. I heard what Karen said. There is a finite number of people that will certainly start to go down. So there is an end at the light of this tunnel. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it ain't a train, because this eventually will go away once we all pass. So with that, my last 15 minutes. Drop retains employees who have long-term experience and knowledge of the city while giving them an opportunity to continue to serve, and then put that money away that they can't get to until they leave as a nest egg to help for unfortunate situations in doing that. And actually, I was surprised when I was here. I used to go to the Citizens Budget Advisory Committees every Thursday night and tried to educate them on drop, because what happens when you go into the drop, you're going to work a certain period of time, you're going to fix that benefit, and then you're going to agree to work. You're going to and this is what I told employees that worked for me. Drop does not guarantee employment. You can't just go into the drop and become a bump on a log and just try to buy out your time and double dip. I left, I work somewhere else now. So, whether or not I'm working here under the drop and having the city have my expertise of all my years of service and all the things that I've done, or whether or not I take my knowledge and experience and go somewhere else and do it, it's doing it. So drop's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it gets a bad rap, and a lot of people just really don't understand that. So anyway, the other thing it does, it keeps that employee here, that you're still paying for their health care, even had they retired, without having to hire another employee and paying for 2 health cares. So I appreciate the time and the extra time, and it's good to see you guys, and I hope you make the right decision. Thanks.
Next card, please.
The last card is Becky, and I'm not going to try your last name either.
Hi, my name is Becky Efkovix. I am a retiree at the City of Titusville. I do live in Titusville. I worked for the city for over 25 years, and I was in the drop. Regarding the retirement, I was in the drop, and I was faced with that April 14th deadline. Had a lot of discussions with my husband. I decided to come out because I know when he retires, I have to pay for his insurance. He doesn't work at a job that's going to offer him insurance. I know I had that on my back. So if I secured my insurance, that was less that I had to worry about. Now, do I have my insurance anymore? Do I have to pay for my insurance? I gave up over $100,000 leaving the drop. So just saying, I made the decision because I knew there was things that had to be done. My other thing I'd like to say is we keep talking about the health insurance and the premiums and all this other stuff. I believe, if I'm not wrong, our premiums are set by the number of participants we have in our health insurance. Offering all these things of asking people to come out, if you put these caps on, I can guarantee you some retirees will leave the insurance. That means less and less people in your plan, which means your premiums are going to continue to go up. So I think rather than looking at ways of making it easier for people to walk away from your plan, paying employees to not be in the plan, all those things come to fruition in the end, that you don't have enough people in the plan to support what you've got. And the way I see what you're doing is you're just whittling out the people in the plan, and the premiums are going to continue to go up. As far as deductibles, yes, we went to $1,000. We went from $500 to $1,000 in the last, starting in October. If you don't think that affects employees as well as retirees, do you think they're going to go get the things that they need to be done when they have to pay a $1,000 deductible plus their copay plus their 20%? They're going to forgo all that wellness stuff that they were supposed to be doing and taking care of themselves because they can no longer afford it. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I would like to give staff some opportunity at this point if there's items that you may have wanted to touch on during the conversation or clarify.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I moved it over there. I'd like to give staff opportunity to talk about any items that they may not have discussed fully while this was going on. Because a lot of the same questions were asked over and over again. So, that includes all members of staff. Bridget, is there something in there that such as I think you told me about interest rates and so forth in the future? I'm not sure you mentioned those tonight.
Well, we've been looking at extremely high claims over the last 3 years. And I believe when the decisions were made to put on a $500 cap, nobody imagined that we would have 3 or 4 years of these huge catastrophic numbers. We've been increasing our premiums slowly over the last few years to try to begin to even that out. And I think we're starting to hit a leveling point. But because we don't know what insurance is going to do, at least for the purpose of looking at claims, we're assuming another 10 to 15% claim over the next couple of years, and then it would level out at 10% a year. And from what I understand, listening and talking to people in the industry, it seems like those are fairly low premium increases compared to what a fully insured plan would have. So I think that that's a good thing for the city. It's just kind of caught up with us faster than we thought it would. Becky had mentioned the way the city sets its premiums, and she's correct. We take our total budgeted costs, we divide it by the number of participants in the plan, and that's how we set our premium every year. I know that the number of retirees have gone down, and they will continue to go down over the next few years. But I've also, and I think Joe may have some of these numbers, if you look at the percentage of claims and how, the demographics of how the claims costs go. And talking to a lot of our healthcare consultants, a lot of times the retiree population are probably some of the bigger cost drivers most of the time when you look at these claims. So I don't know how, if you were to reinstate a cap and people decided they did not want our benefit anymore, I don't know how that would affect the premium, because you'd have to take a look at the cost being, the costs and how they're incurred by the different sectors of the population. I don't know if it would make much of an impact, but I can't say that, for sure. Joe knows more about the demographics of the claims, but I do think that that's an important thing to consider. My fear is cash flow, and you all know this, and looking at the liability, before the new GASB was implemented, we knew there was a liability out there, but the rating agencies weren't seeing it. We weren't, our balance sheet wasn't showing the complete liability, and unfortunately it's grown dramatically over the last few years due to healthcare costs and other things beyond our control. I believe that with a cap or without a cap, I think that there's going to be impacts. If you reinstate a cap, I think the impacts to the city and the city's budget will be less than if you don't. I believe that at some point healthcare costs are going to have to be addressed, and maybe and maybe with this capping the liability a little bit could buy you a little bit of time, and give the city some time to really look at its plans to try to determine what is the most thoughtful and best thing for all of the employees, not just the retirees. I think that those are the two biggest things you need to consider. We will not hit the $700 cap in FY19. We will not hit the $700 cap in FY20. So there's time, even if you chose to reinstate a cap, just to control that liability and maybe help save us some money in our operating side. There's some time to work through those issues. And I think that that's the biggest message that I see from the financial side.
Any other questions from anybody else?
Let me ask you, if in 2021, we'll also hopefully have increased revenue. Wouldn't that be fair to say? I mean, we've got a lot of housing coming in.
Under normal circumstances, I would say yes, but this pending legislation with the additional homestead exemption, preliminary estimates are anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million it's going to cost us, and we don't control that lost revenue. That means the millage rate will have to be raised just to keep us even. So I can't.
Okay.
It's not looking good.
Can we do a public service announcement and say, don't vote for the new homestead? Because that's really, I talked to the assistant county attorney, and she was sort of saying 400,000 was the estimate of what is coming out of the city budget if the new homestead exemption passes.
And what that means is to maintain the exact same budget we have for this year, you're going to have to raise the millage rate, or you're going to have to cut. And in the city's budget, the biggest cost driver are people.
Yeah. Okay.
Member Diesel?
I don't have a question down here, so am I on hold or just?
No, keep going.
Okay. I was, and I've been there from the very beginning, I think, as far as where I feel about the promise and all that sort of thing. I wanted to really get an idea what Tier 1 and Tier 2 were about, as opposed to Tier 3, which I was trying to understand better. And I kind of already stated it, but when I've got a guy who I don't see anymore, but who went and bought years to get out, to get the promised insurance, sounded like a promise to me. And when you tell me the story, Reggie, that if you get out, you're being told if you get out at a certain time, you get the promised insurance. And that sticks with me. So I'm going to leave it out there that with Tier 1 and Tier 2, I think a promise was made. I think so much of a promise that somebody bought it out to get in under the deadline, and then we said no. And I'm going to stand by that at this moment.
Mr. City Manager, do you want to address that point?
I defer to staff, sir.
I'll try. I believe, Member Diesel, you're referring to the employees that were hired pre-2003 and retired before April of 2014. That's the Tier 1. That's the Tier 1 group. The Tier 2 group are those who left under less than normal retirement, okay? That the city's paying a percentage and the retirees paying, not the 50-50 split like Tier 3, but there are a small group where some conditions were expectations were made to a small, there were 15 of those non-Medicare eligible. That's Tier 2. Now we get to the Tier 3 as the policy developed. And there is a difference between the OPEB benefit and a retirement benefit. Those benefits vest differently. So the OPEB benefit, as we talked about with some of the retirees that were in the drop, for example, had an opportunity to leave in 2014, and knowing that their OPEB benefit was going to be different than if they stayed. They also knew that their retirement benefit was a retirement benefit. That was an expectation made between the employee and the pension board, which is different from the OPEB policy in terms of the retiree benefit or the health insurance that was developed through policy. And I think we may be mixing the two here in terms of mixing the vesting in terms of expectations. When an employee retired, bought service, for example, bought service for that to gain that benefit in retirement, to accelerate the time that they would get to get their benefit, which is different than the policy that the city was trying to manage its OPEB liability. That's what we have in terms of the retiree subsidies of 1, 2, and the third tier. And then the fourth tier were those employees hired after 2003. So I hope I'm answering your question in terms of the benefits and the decisions that people made over time. It wasn't a threat. It was a communication. It was a notice.
Was it an understanding? Was it an understanding that this guy bought out so he could get insurance for life? And just let me continue real quick, and I guess I stick to this story because maybe I understood it. Was that they were getting out because they made some decisions.
Correct.
You're right. We keep saying that we made decisions. Some made decisions to stay in. Some made decisions to get out and stay in and make money in the drop. Mm-hmm. And some got out and lost $100,000 based on their understanding or promise that they were going to have insurance for life. And let's just talk about that specific. Is that a fair assessment that they had that understanding when they got out? And most got out for that understanding.
But that's correct. And if you look at that memo that I prepared in the packet that was put the notice by former Mr. Ryan, former city manager, also at that time, that $500 cap, which was the OPEB policy, not the retirement policy. So again, it's the different vesting schedule was going to be applied, at that point in time, in 2014. That's how that cap, if you will, the $500 cap for all employees, all retirees, for Tier 1 and Tier 2.
So what was the understanding of the young man who bought his time out? What was his understanding?
Well, Mr. Elmore and I spoke, the way I'm understanding, okay, and there is a purchase of service time, and it's a benefit of the plan. You can buy military time, prior service time, air time. Not sure what Mr. Elmore bought, but he bought time that was a value that accelerated his pension benefit. It allowed him to leave employment sooner to gain that retirement benefit.
Right. Right. Which included insurance.
Yes.
The policy was being developed at the same time. That's correct. But just because he bought time, he bought time in the pension program doesn't mean that that pension plan vested the health care benefit. That's what I'm trying to explain. Those are mutually exclusive. There are two different vesting schedules. Two different vesting schedules, and they're separate.
It's certainly I wasn't there, but it's certainly my belief that he understood that he was buying out, like I've seen people do in education. I'm going to use my service, my whatever, to get out. And quite honestly, if I could go back and jump into the FRS drop for educators 2 years earlier, before they changed it all, I would have had about $150,000 more myself. But they changed it when I was at year 28, and you got to get to year 30 to get that. I say that because I understand how things change on you, but I just don't think that we can change the rules in the middle of the game, and maybe they did that other places, but I think you can't do that.
I guess we're through with that one. Nothing else, right? Mr. Bogle, you had mentioned the tiers, and you had them couched in such a way that they were arbitrary. You can go up. That they were arbitrary. Actually, the tiers were trying to be fair.
No, I wasn't trying to say they were arbitrary. I was just saying that the tiers just reflect a different group of people for a different benefit. And
Well,
typically,
based on how many years they had worked.
No.
If you put, that's why if you entered here and exited here, that's the period for that group. And as you got closer to just coming on board, the advantages went down. And that's because they were brand new. And they came in with no expectation. If they signed the contract, they signed the contract.
And that's kind of where, when I say the tiers, and let me clarify in the fact that Tier 1 currently has not been impacted by any of the benefits as proposed when they got hired. Through the discussion and trying to reduce through the history of, the first exodus through retirement, the second one in 2003 where they capped all new hires at $8 per year for every year of service, capping it at $200. That was the second major initiative, which then set the Tier 1 as everybody who retired that was hired prior to that. So the tiers, you're correct, they're set to a certain group of people based upon when they were hired, and then obviously when they are able to exit, whether or not that's through 25 years of service under a police and fire plan or all those other kinds of things. Part of what I was getting at is that now you've set Tier 4, which I think Joe misspoke. He said that was started with the 2003. That was in 2017 because you guys had just instituted the Tier 4 right before we had the workshop. Oh, that's Tier 5? Okay, my apologies. I didn't realize we had 5. So, but what we've done for that tier is people are going to come to work here knowing that there is no expectation of a benefit at the end because that was not part of the deal.
That's not my question.
I know.
When they were originally put in, or my observation, when they were originally put in, they were trying to keep the people who had been here a long time get the biggest advantage, and down the line as the people weren't here as long, so they got less.
When the tiers started, I had pretty much left. I was not here through the negotiations. I know Tom House, when he spoke and went through the contract negotiations, whatnot, in 2012, where they met with the LIU and the PBA and whatnot. That's when they negotiated some of those differences, and that's the language that's in the contract. And then when they started going with this Tier 3, because I had heard, like what Scott Ginnicky had said, that there's some people that chose to leave in order to preserve a benefit, and some people who chose to stay and took a chance.
It's a different question. I mean, different situation.
But I mean, all those go into, and like I said, is you might want to call somebody else up to kind of talk about the tiers, because like I said, I wasn't here. I didn't live through that. Everything
Well,
prior to
I was, and
2012.
that's why those were instituted, so that everybody didn't just take a cut across the board, whether they were here 20 years and ready to retire, or here 3 years and had no expectation. So I just want to point out that what you said wasn't completely the case. Okay?
Okay, I might respectfully disagree, but that's okay.
It's okay.
All right. Thank you.
I can tell you that was the idea of it. Mr. City Manager, City Attorney, we keep hearing about a promise, and that's a big item in everybody's mind, and I understand that completely.
Talking to the mic, please.
Sorry. We keep hearing about a promise, and it's everybody is, it's a big item, and I understand that. But the former city attorney, and I'm not a lawyer, so, said that there was no promise made. Now, some of you were here. Hey, come on, order.
I think he was drawing a legal distinction between a contract and what employees felt they had an expectation or a promise of. Whereas a contract is something you have mutual understanding, you sign an agreement, you have a term of a contract. He pointed out to council that it was in policy, so that retirees retired under that policy, they took that as a promise that guaranteed insurance would be there, or that benefit would be there. Although the policy itself says this could be amended at any time, when they retired, they took that as a promise. He was making a distinction between a contractual arrangement between two parties that understand obligations that they signed an agreement versus a policy.
But he was saying that a policy was not a promise. It was something that was there at that time.
Correct. He was pointing out the fact that it was a policy which by law can be changed, and by the terms of the policies can be amended at any time. But that's not to say that an individual doesn't feel that they were promised something. So I'm not going to try and diminish and say they don't feel they had a promise. He was making a distinction between a legal contract obligation versus a policy.
And which brings with it everything in writing, a legal contract, right?
If you want to address the contract, that's something that
I get a right to talk too, guys. Come on.
That is the difference between a policy and a contract. Is a contract would be the terms spelled out, parties have a mutual understanding and signed agreements, and you have a contract right, versus a policy which by terms says can be changed. He was drawing that legal distinction between legally your ability to do something versus telling people what they felt they had a promise to.
I'm just pointing out he stood right there and told all of us that, and now I understand the answer. One is a contract, and the other is a policy. Okay, thank you. City Manager, is there anything you want to address?
No, sir.
Okay. I guess it's, okay, I got some lights on here. Member Stoker?
I actually had a question for City Manager. Have you been investigating or looking into different plans now in light of this, or where are we looking at for moving forward and planning for the future?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, through the Affordable Care Act, the levels of health care are measured in bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels. We are at gold right now. In order to address the liability and the operating expenses, we're looking at a plan redesign, and with the ability for people to buy back up to gold if they want to. But I don't know what that plan redesign will look like. I don't know what the premiums are going to be or anything like that, but we'll have an impact on the debt that we've incurred.
I think kind of what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier is these numbers are real numbers. Whether or not we agree with them, they're there. And so I think moving forward, I personally feel more comfortable implementing that $700 cap, because I think that will give us at least a year to kind of figure out where will this additional expense come from. Will it be raising the millage rate? Will it be charging current employees to pay for the retirees' health care? Will it be increasing our debt? What will it be? And I think that will give us some time to figure that out safely, so we don't have as much unfunded liability. We still will have that cash flow. Again, that's going to be there no matter if we have no cap or the $700 at this point, but it gives us a little bit of time to kind of figure out what are these plan redesigns. Is it going to be that people are going to have not as good plans? Is it going to be that maybe people that have other jobs and have other health insurance plans currently will take the lower plan and then we're not paying that additional amount on them? I don't know. But that's kind of where I feel more comfortable at this point.
I agree with what you're saying, I believe, and one of the things is that it will affect certainly, and I think this was already said, but I'm not sure, what our credit rating affects how much we pay in interest, and I suspect the future interest won't be as low as it is now, and then we will compound that with the penalty that banks put on you for having a lower credit rating. And we do millions of dollars, and that's going to be expensive for us because that's going out the door, and we get nothing for it. So that's, I think, part of what you're addressing. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, sir. So, here's where I'm at, and here's why. So I am definitively of Tier 1 and 2, no cap. Tier 3, I still think that we should move them into Tier 1. Here's why and here's how. Ultimately, and Member Stoker, I hear you on this is hard. It's a hard spot. It's part of the job, right? So they went out and scooped up brains and guts off the road for our law enforcement agencies and our firefighters, and they went and held crying moms, and they, that's hard. And they did it for 20 plus years, and folks got yelled at because you work with the public when you work with the city, and you got yelled at for 20 or 30 or 40 years with an idea, and written, not written. I think the idea is prevalent, and it has been the same conversation for years of the idea of what it was going to look like at the end, which was I retire, I do my time, I stuck in with a lower wage on the low end, I'll retire, I'll have some benefits, and that's why I'll hang around, which I think was the exact intent of the policy created many, many moons ago. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And then I think we have arrived at this problem for twofold. One is because we did not, through time, acknowledge the amount that it would cost and responsibly fund that as relevant to our art. We knew it was coming, we created it, we just didn't fund it. Okay? And now we're eating that cost. Additionally, I think that we are also here because a few years ago, in order to make some kind of change fiscally, we taught our retirees and our staff that caps are negotiable, right? We taught that all of a sudden now there's a thing called a cap, and we will negotiate with you as staff and retirees on what that's going to mean. We taught that. It was a horrible lesson to teach. I think it was bad. I think the idea of the lesson was you work here for a lot of time, you retire, go fishing, not sit here year over year over year. So I think the ultimate crux of it is that we have a liability. I totally believe that there will be adverse action relative to the ability to borrow at the same rate relative to today. I really do believe that, right? So I don't think that it's going away, and it doesn't mean anything to the scope. I don't know. I think in 2 years we'll have a better understanding of what the scope of that impact may be. As outlined in an actuarial report that we'll do in about 2 years, that will give us, I think, a better understanding, and we can measure impact throughout the state of Florida. So there will be some other folks that we can look at. Relative to Tier 3, I think in my heart, what I believe is the gist of the deal was get out now, get this, stay in, let go of that, and you kind of roll the dice. I don't take away for somebody who did their homework, rolled the dice, looked at the details, found out the deal, and came out on a good side of it. I don't. Had we, and that's, I think, probably a point of maybe differing views on it, but that's how I see it. I just think that somebody took a risk, did the homework, and I think that it paid off for them in that one specific area. So that's why I go for tier 3. I also believe that there will be a portion of retirees, and maybe a larger portion who did not take that risk, who would view it as not fair, but it doesn't mean that it's not right. So that's where I'm at with the rationale. It's not nice, it's not fun, but I think they made a conscious decision. The city outlined an idea, they ran with it, and I think that it was the right call. So that's the rationale. Why to move? I think that when I asked about the amount of unfunded liability, I'm not trying to split them on paper. I don't think that we need to do that unless staff said it would be a great idea to do so. I think I get the gist of it. I don't believe that paying an actuary for another study to tell us about ballpark data. I think we have the data to make the decisions, and so therefore I don't believe that we need to go through that drill. But what I do glean from that is, if we are looking at really chomping on the how do we take a long-term approach to the unfunded liability? How do we do that? That if this much of the problem that we are looking at is directly line itemed to retirees who they are retired, they are done, they have passed the prime working years. This is not the time to go back out and start getting the workforce, because that in no way, shape, or form was the character that the city was trying to portray. And that, to me, is a big deal. It's character. It's the city. We said we do it. You can believe it when the city says we do it. That's a big deal. To the point of where I do believe that current employees should be watching this. They should see, what is it going to look like? Am I going to have to do this every 2 years? Am I going to have to do, I hope not. And I hope that with a set of confidence that we can get out of it. I think that we've been chipping away over it for the past few years, but that's my rationale of that's a big deal too. So take care of them all. That's the why I feel okay with doing it. I ultimately think it's the right thing to do. I think from the scope of liability for the group we're talking about is this, where the unfunded liability may be this, but the retirees are not 70 plus million. They are a very smaller portion of it. I think there's other places to go in order to make up the money. I think that we find the money by killing the CRA. Do that. Kill it. That's the right answer. And here's why. We've had the CRA for 30 plus years. The idea was to redevelop a blighted area. For all intents and purposes, I look at the downtown area. Our buildings are better, our streets are better, we have baskets, we have plants, we have monuments, we have so on and so on, which is good. And if there's a serious talk about where's the money going to come from, unrestrict those funds, apply it to this, apply it to our ARC, and that's where we find money from, at least a portion. It doesn't cure it. And that's where to do it. I would much rather see our retirees taken care of than have another street party.
Sounds really good, but that's not the way the CRA works. The CRA goes to a baseline on the tax, and everything over that, instead of going to the county, or a greater portion of it going to the county and the city, it comes back to the city and goes into the CRA area. So if you stop the CRA, you would lose that money to the county, and that would accomplish nothing except negative for us in Titusville. So think of another one, because that one ain't working. And that's why the county wants to, because certain members of the county commission want to get rid of all the CRAs because they feel they're getting, what?
Shorted
was
is the word.
I was going to say another word. I couldn't think of one. Shorted by the city. So that's not a good idea. I'm sorry. Member Nelson.
I want you guys to know this is a really hard decision, and we really want to do what's fair. I think for me, my problem with this has been we're looking at the retirees and saying we can take the money from you guys as opposed to taking it across the board. I mean, we have to stay solvent. Understand that. We have to be solvent, because if we're not solvent, nobody's getting a dime. But at the same time, I'm sort of like, the current employees have the ability to go out and say, I don't like this deal, I can leave. You guys are retired, and unless you're going to be the greeter at Walmart, you don't have those same opportunities. And so that really bothers me. And yes, I know there are some of the retirees that have gotten other jobs, and they can survive, they can do well. But for a lot of our retirees, I don't think they have those same opportunities. So to me, if we're going to do something, it really, we need to go back and study, and it needs to be fair to everybody. So that's sort of my thought. For me, the tier 1 and 2 is easier, and I know Mr. House is going to shoot me, but tier 3 to me is harder, because it's sort of like these people over here took the money from the drop, and these people over here gave it up. So to me, that's a harder question. That being said, I don't think that we need to target the retirees and take it from somebody who may or may not be able to afford it.
Okay, unless there is further discussion, it says here we're supposed to provide staff direction with regard to the options listed to address the city's OPEB liability. Anybody want to take a shot at it?
I would like to make a motion to reinstate the cap of $700 for tiers 1 and 2 without a change to tier 3, would be my motion.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second? One more time. Do I have a second? No, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Don't hear a second. Anyone else have any suggestions?
Yeah, so I make a motion to remove the cap from tier 1 and tier 2.
There isn't a cap now, is
Yeah,
there?
just a clarification.
Not to
sir,
reinstate.
There
right.
is a no cap.
And I would second that.
Would you say that once more, because
Sure. To not reinstate the cap, the $700 cap to tier 1 and tier 2. So there is no cap for tier 1 and tier 2. I'm gonna try it like that.
and that's it? Was there anything else in that motion?
I think for the sake of brevity, I'm gonna try this in 2 parts.
Okay. Did I hear a second on that?
You heard a second.
Okay. Discussion?
I want everybody to understand that we need to look at what happens in the next year. This would be, I think, our preference, but it may be something that at some point is not sustainable. And I got to tell you, I'd rather have $500 or $600 or $700 in insurance rather than none. So I think we're going to try it.
Member Diesel?
Like the very first time we did this, I think that the Tier 1 and Tier 2, and I've heard much, much more since then, is about fairness and about what's right. And I also want to point out, and again, I'm not second-guessing anybody's numbers, but when we first did this, before the word actuary came up, we were basically told it was going to cost us $54,000 a year. And if I'm wrong with that number, feel free to correct me. But that was the number we were given on that night in whatever month it was. And when we said we're going to remove the cap and we're going to abide by the promise that was made when people were buying their time back and people were getting out and losing $100,000 from drop. And because of that, I definitely am supporting the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 no cap.
Okay. My only comment is it's going to come from somewhere, and it's got to come from somewhere. And, you know, we can't bankrupt the city, and it's not as easy as just continuing to raise the taxes because the state gives, or the county, I guess, gives us a limit at 10%. We're at 7.6 something now. So there's a limit that we can raise it too. So when and if that hits that, then we got to look at, and maybe we do now, even looking at the plan, the insurance plans as to what's, you know, what can we pay for. So I'm just telling you the way it has to come from somewhere, and these are options, and I don't know which way to go on it. So. All right. Any other discussion?
I just want it to be clear. Again, this is a really hard decision, and just so you guys know why I'm really nervous about having the no cap is because I'm nervous that the plans are not going to be as great moving forward, and the people that are really going to need it are going to suffer with high deductibles and the different plan redesigns. So for me, I feel a lot more comfortable having a $700 cap and somebody paying the difference between $700 and what it may be a month, whatever that amount is. I feel like that's a safer bet if we're rolling the dice right now than to go to this no cap and have to deal with an unfunded liability amount and this whole plan redesign. I'm nervous that some people that are really going to need access to a good doctor and to be able to afford it, it's going to hurt those people. So whether if we want to agree or disagree on what's going to happen, I've spent a lot of time on this trying to really figure out what I felt like was the best decision for the retirees and for us as a city as a whole and all employees. That's where I'm at. And I just want that to be clear. This is probably one of the most difficult decisions I've had to make since being in office. So.
I agree with you 100%. It is a very, very difficult decision. It's not arbitrary on my part either. I suffer whatever you guys are going to suffer on this. I'm a retiree also. So I've got some skin in the game too. But I totally agree with you. Without putting some sort of a cap on it, I think downrange it's hard to tell what would happen. I won't vote for this, but others may. Any other discussion? If not, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Say again?
I just need clarification. I'm saying yes to.
You want to repeat your motion?
The motion was for no cap for Tier 1 and Tier 2.
And that was it. Clerk?
Member Diesel?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson?
No.
Vice Mayor Behringer?
Yes.
Member Stokel?
No.
Passes 3-2.
The second motion.
Oh, go right ahead.
Yeah. So my second motion is to move Tier 3 to Tier 1 with the consequent no cap.
You understand Tier 3 is a large segment of employees. There's a Tier 3 drop employees. That's a smaller segment. I just want to clarify.
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, the Tier 3 drop members.
I have a second. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? No second to the motion, it dies. Anything else? Anybody want to try anything else? We can do that. We can take. We're going to take a 10-minute break so that everybody can think over what they want.
When you come back at 10:30, you'll need to vote to continue.
Yeah.